then Tomardo, then Sanjay, Songi, Pomon Toval, Kayachadang, around Tombachu, someone by Yang Tobachu.
Initially, as usual, we should make sure that our motivation is the right one as we set out to continue to listen to the Dharma instructions. And the motivation that should be ours is the one that lets us think from the bottom of our hearts, give rise to the wish that all beings may be established in the state of the awakening of great Buddhahood, so that we may bring about this great goal, to establish all of these beings in that state. We now proceed to listen to the instructions. And as usual, we start out by way of placing ourselves under the protection of the three rare and precious ones, taking refuge to them and giving rise to the enlightened attitude. With that, we then imagine how our own root teacher is present above ourselves, above our heads, sitting on the 1,000-petaled lotus flower and the moon disk, how he sits there smiling benignly, and we imagine him, we regard him as such, as the essence of all Buddhas and Bodhisattvas and root and lineage teachers.
Lama Suanda Lama Yamanda Lama la so ce ce da de Lama de ngarang sombo prograne ma pe ngarang ne de weza khado ngadang denba yop gunga saka da we yin de ye no do jap che chong ge so de yo song.
Having prayed to the Lama in this way, we then proceed to imagine how he now dissolves into ourselves through the crown of our heads, and how he slowly sinks down to our heart center in order to come to rest there. We imagine him sitting there in a 5-colored sphere of light, which is about has the shape of an egg open towards the top, and we imagine him to be sitting inside this sphere of light in the cross-legged position. Now, from among the 7 points of mind training, today we come to the 4th point, in which we hear instruction about how we can make such mind training the practice of our lives, how we can make it into a practice for the duration of our entire life. The presentation of how to make this practice, the practice for the entire duration of our lives, comes under two subheadings. The first is how to practice while alive, how to practice during the duration of our lifetime, and how to implement it when the moment of passing away, the moment of death comes. Now, first to the first topic, how to practice during our lifetime. And introducing this point, we have the root verse of Chagwa Yeshe Dorje himself, who says, 5 powers are to be applied to yourself. This means nothing else but that we have to look for particular ways in how to make this practice our practice for the duration of our lives, how to properly implement it, how to properly train in it. And this is best done by way of applying these 5 powers to yourself, to oneself. Talking about these 5 powers, the first one of them is the power of resolve, or which could also be called the power of intention. Having recognized how beneficial it is to give rise to the enlightened attitude and to nurture it in all situations, to give rise to that which is commonly known as bodhicitta, we resolve to make this attitude our own attitude. At best, we could resolve to make this attitude our own attitude from this very moment until we ourselves have achieved the awakening of Buddhahood for the sake of all beings. If we should not resolve to take it up, to nurture this for that long, we could decide to make this attitude our own attitude for the duration of this particular life. Or we could decide from this moment on until the same date next year, I will make this my main resolve, my main attitude, practicing on the principles, acting on the principles of the enlightened attitude of bodhicitta. Or for instance, we could take this resolve for the duration of a month, or a week, or even a day, and then renew it again and again if we should feel like this. So in this way, we decide, we express that intention of ours, we express that resolve of ours for whatever duration we decide upon, to make this attitude, the enlightened attitude of the awakened heart of bodhicitta, our own.
마저 용도 용원세고를 자랑 탐지다.
The second power is that of familiarization, making ourselves familiar with the attitude of bodhicitta, the enlightened attitude, to such an extent that in whatever situation we may find ourselves, we never forget this attitude. Whatever activity we are about to be performing, be this virtue, or should we find ourselves immersed in non-virtuous acting, or should we find ourselves in situations which are of unsure outcome, we could always remind ourselves of the enlightened attitude of bodhicitta, the awakened heart, to such an extent as to make it an ever-present thought.
And sometimes give us our Santawa Goa Jepa Kandan Deba Lazo. Any Tendawa gave us our and Juba Capsule young, any Tenshija young Dabal Sambazine, Tatela, Kahon Sonchuk, Sam, Geva de Drabtani, then Ninja Chambu Unge Sanjin Dangela, who was about it, Sonchuk, Sandu, Madrawa Dang. Son Sonang, and to Dipag our drub yumundo. Dipag our drub yundu, the Tenshig somebody seen, then Tandang Sonchuk, Sanga, Chu Dongi, Dongbani, Juma, Marum Taoyam, Tendrilla, Song Tangne, then Sonchuk sent somebody.
This means that when we find ourselves in situations in which we, for instance, practice virtue, like presentation of offerings, the performance of prostrations or circumambulations, etc., during such situations and activities, we should always remind ourselves of the proper motivation. We should always make sure that we're motivated by the thought of bringing about the greatest possible benefit and welfare for beings through our virtuous doing. And of course, when we conclude such activities, we should never forget to dedicate whatever merit we have accumulated through these for the welfare of beings. In this way, we bring to bear the bodhicitta, or the enlightened attitude, as it is in accord with the world of appearances and phenomena. On the other hand, we might occasionally find ourselves immersed in non-virtuous activity. And as we recognize this, we could bring to bear the bodhicitta as it is in accord with true reality, realizing that all phenomena and appearances are empty of any self-nature, free of any existence or substance unto themselves.
Song gave us also your mind. Dipag is also your mind. Jatan Jiting Sawa, Luma Ting Sawa. That's not so bad in the Drugra. Tandrilla, Juba Casa, young Tenshiji, somebody saying it. Doggy, Luma Ting Jiting Sawa, and they, then a Mombala, Senjin Tangila, Pendo Jachambo, Yungai. Maranga, then a Luma Ting Jiting Sawa, and the Latin, Senjin Tangila, Deji, Chabaji, Tobaco, Lazo, then the Sonjus and Lambani, Madra, Dante, Donna gave your Sonju Samna Rabarsawan Donna, Maron Yang Tanki, Sonju Samkona, La Yang to Jangu. Sonju Samna Rabarsawan.
I forgot to say before, to train ourselves in all of these situations of whatever type there might be, to look at the situations and recognize them as for what they are. We train our awareness. We sharpen our awareness to such an extent that we knowingly, that we are aware of the circumstances in which we find ourselves, that we are aware of what it is that we're doing at any given moment. And similarly, we might sometimes find ourselves in situations the outcome of which is unsure. There is neither any particular virtue connected with it, nor is there any particular non-virtue connected with such activities. Again, when we find ourselves in such situations, when we become aware of what it is that we're doing, of what it is that we're encountering, and how we are reacting to this, we could give rise to the wish from the bottom of our hearts that through this particular activity, whatever it might be, that in the future, the sort of benefit may derive thereof, that we will be enabled to bring about the greatest possible benefit and welfare for beings through such doing.
송주 생기 기나 대 공내 공도 별을 탑라 당하롱 뭐 예성 그 냠네 네 여동라이 년바도 제름 라면 남겨 라서 반냠네 간지나요 당하라 pen 로마가 년바데 몸지 댄서와 다 팀지도 단단고 말에 라고 삼바 된다와 초심에 봐 당하루 가시 톱톱게 되는 냠네 양다발라 몽고 그래.
The third power is literally known as the virtuous or the white seed, or the sowing thereof. It simply means that we are never satisfied with whatever virtuous activity we perform, that we are never satisfied with how much bodhicitta or enlightened attitude we have brought about in ourselves, and that we continuously strive to bring about more, to practice harder, to practice better. For instance, if we were to repeat mantras of Tara, if we had accumulated 100,000 of them, this attitude would help us not to think, well, I've accumulated my 100,000 Tara mantras, I've done my bit, but to think, well, there is more to be done. I should continue with the practice. I should continue with this practice or with whatever it is. I should continue to school myself in the practice of bodhicitta to the greatest possible extent and never be satisfied or with what it is that we have done and sit back and think, well, that's it, I've done my bit, now let others do theirs.
더 진진게 남도 농성나 더 진진게 남도 답변나 네 나로 동네게 밑바지 좀나 나라 이 동만도 나사 해용 거리 다 남도 좀 대단진게 남도 야나 되네 매진게 나라 되네 동문이 바다 되네 매진게 나라 내 바시 용하라 되네 용게 나랑라 도보 용게 삼번 남도진 다들 당진게 남도 다 된다 남도지 정나 되는 제와 토마매 바니 니 남도 당진게 남도 니라 되네 나랑라 동안 뭐 그게 용하리.
The fourth of these powers is the so-called, for want of a better translation, the so-called undermining power. Undermining the idea of self-appreciation, undermining the thought of having to serve ourselves first. It is these thoughts which might appear in our minds that we should put ourselves first and everything else later on. For instance, if we were to practice the meditation of Tonglen, of sending and taking, all of a sudden some discomfort, some distress might appear. There might be a pain that was not there a moment ago, and we might think, oh, look, these are the negative side effects of giving rise to bodhicitta, the negative side effects of mind training or Tonglen practice. All of these ideas, which are discursive, which are self-centered, are simply that which from the very beginning, or rather since beginning less time, since samsara has started, all of these thoughts have been the root cause of our problem from the very start. It is these ideas which led us to believe that there truly is a self, there truly is an ego or anything of that sort that needs to be protected against whatever, against others. And therefore, clinging to that erroneous idea, we have immersed ourselves again and again and again in the cycle of continuous rebirth. Such thoughts, such ideas which are predominantly concerned with our own well-being have to be undermined. One could also call it the power of the eroding power, just thought of that word, which aims at that particular idea, that thought of ours, that there truly is a self, that we have to hold on to, that we have to protect. Since beginningless time we've been having this idea, and it has been the root cause for all the trouble, the pain, the suffering that we have forever experienced. And it is exactly that idea that needs to be undermined, that needs to be eroded as to be completely eradicated.
나랑 기부 그 송지게 살 깨터발 줄기 나는데 제발도요 다들 뛴다네서 송지게 공부 마습제 봐도 송주제 사람 뭐 나면 만자와 공도 패라쇼지 제가 나는데.
And the fifth of the five powers is the power of prayer or aspiration. With whatever we do, with whatever virtuous activity we perform, whatever it is that we might be doing for that matter, we should combine the wish that through our activity the greatest possible benefit for the sake of beings may be brought about. In this way, we should combine whatever we do with this motivation, with this idea, constantly keep the welfare of beings in our minds in this way. And in particular, we should pray that from now on, until we ourselves have achieved the awakening of Buddhahood for the welfare of all beings, that we may never ever be separated from the two types of bodhicitta, the two types of attitude which serve us, which propel us along the paths that leads to such awakening in the first place.
Sherembe가 가서 다성을 당을 쳐다 명이 간리스 그거를 해서는 단디게 똑나니 연자랑지 제가게 되네 당마텔라 똑나니 문자와 나요래 다디 되는 말.
Now this is how we should practice for the duration of our lifetimes. But then eventually, sooner or later, the moment of death will come. And we have heard that also at the moment of death and after having passed away, we should act, we should proceed upon the principles of bodhicitta, of the enlightened attitude. And when that happens, when that moment comes, then again 5 powers, which are other ones than the ones that we have heard about, yet other 5 powers are to be applied.
또 동보대라 되는 다 양배 공소 칭리바 그 니기 대비전 다 나랑서 되는 칭리바가 단면 공자월란로네 되는 나사제 도루도루로 되는 멤버 당지게 단다다니 야 수토고 말에 제와 용결에 라서 같은디 그 갑라레나 나랑가 조동 신을 라서 yana yonti Lama kunju la chebambarwa yin ngarang ga yeje tenrawa sane teni ti jose na tela cha yin zang chawa tangji pa pang ta pen jaga zi mela zhi cha na te mela zhi cha wa ri ta ti jaga tela ngarang xian jia sei jia yo ma ro mela zhi cha wa pe te yan de ngarang la jose na long ji gang ye ba te Lama do kunju san na chebambar cha ne te ngarang ga jose na tela xian jia kan sei ji yo ma ro tenrawa gu yes.
Now the first of these powers, which come to bear when the moment of death is upon us, is the power of letting go of our possessions. Eventually this moment will come, we may fall sick, we may be advised to see a doctor or to go to hospital, and then shortly after that it becomes apparent that we have fallen sick very gravely, and this will be a terminal disease. While we are still in the possession of whatever it is that we do possess, all our riches, all our various objects, etc., it would be a good idea to mentally then offer them to the 3 rare and precious ones, to the 3 jewels, or the Buddha and the Dharma and the Sangha, while we're still in the possession of them, and in this way use them in order to accumulate merit, in order to practice virtue. When we're going to die, we're going to lose all of these possessions anyway. So why not let's make one last virtuous use of them by way of offering them, and as kind of a side effect even accumulate merit while doing so. So the power of letting go of all whatever possessions we do have is the first one that is to be brought, that is to be applied when death is upon us, when the moment of dying comes closer.
Lama Kunjulan, Chepambro, Yansan, Yiki, Portani, and Tangusa, Mupo, Aran Sena, Lasso Bayo, the Suyenayum, Sola Pinto window, Arange, Podon, Pomo, Lasso Ba, Sola Yena Yana, Menkundawa, Yana, then Tendawa, Upuga, Sondawa, the Gandhi and Tela charging Mapapa Tang.
So eventually that moment of death will come, and we would be well advised to make good use of our possessions in this way. Now, having then initially offered them in our minds to the Buddha, the Dharma, and to Sangha, and having made greatest use of them in this way by way of acting virtuously and accumulating merit as such, we could then proceed, after we have given away all these possessions already anyway, to now divide them, to distribute them among them who could make good use of them. As we're about to die, and there will invariably be some possessions left that we could in any which way get rid of, so we might give them to those who might benefit of them. We might have partners, a wife or a husband, or we might have whatever other family, we might have children, or anything of that sort to whom we might give these possessions. Or, for instance, if we should find ourselves in a hospital, and if we were about to die there, we could give some of our possessions or money, whatever we possess, to the hospital, etc. There are endless possibilities how and to whom we could give our possessions away. So without hanging on to them, but making good use of them while we're still alive, as we're about to die, we could proceed with whatever possession, with whatever wealth it is that we have in such a way.
Lama Kunju Samji Sanji Labdo Samba.
Before I forgot to say that power of, in this way, giving away our possessions, making good use of them before we die, is yet again known as the power of the virtues of the white seed. Now, which brings us to the second power, which is also again known as the power of prayer or aspiration. At this particular point, before we pass away, we could now practice again, as we have been told so many times, the so-called 7 branches of performing prostrations, offerings, confessing our misdeeds, etc. Even if we're not able to do so, if whatever there is prevents us, whatever sickness, for instance, we might have, prevents us from practicing in this way, at least we could give rise to the prayer, to the aspiration in our minds and our hearts, that through all the virtue that I have ever practiced and that I will ever practice in the 3 times, in past, present and future, may I always be in the possession of this enlightened attitude, of bodhicitta. May I never forget bodhicitta until I have achieved the awakening of Buddhahood myself, and in particular, may I always be in touch with such great exalted teachers as are able to teach me, to guide me on the path that leads to such awakening. May I always, throughout all of my lifetimes, on the basis of whatever virtue I have practiced, be in the presence, or come into the presence of an authentic teacher that is truly able to propel me forward on that path. That is the prayer, that the aspiration that we could give rise to at the very least. The very root cause, the underlying error, which is the cause for all of our sufferings and pains, and in the end also for our thinking that we now experience the suffering of death, is none other but our erroneous belief in the existence of a self, and this clinging to this belief into the existence of a self. Since time beginningless, throughout innumerable rebirths, that has been the root cause of whatever trouble we found ourselves into, of whatever pain and suffering we have experienced. Therefore, again, the power of erosion, the power of undermining that idea, that thought, has to be brought to bear, so that we can come to understand that there is no such self, and there never ever has existed such a self in the first place. So this is the power of erosion, eroding or undermining. And then, when death is upon us, we might wish or think from the bottom of our hearts that even though as we are going into the process of dying now and eventually we'll be reborn, that throughout all of our lifetimes we may never ever be separated from the precious bodhicitta, the precious enlightened attitude, which allows us to act for the welfare of others in such a way as to bring about the awakening of Buddhahood. That is the power of resolve. Then there comes the so-called power of training. Power of training means all the training, all the meditative experience, training that we have accumulated in this lifetime and all in previous lifetimes. Whatever training we have performed, however much we have practiced, to bring this to bear with keeping the enlightened attitude for the bodhicitta in mind is to be brought to bear. Here we also mean again the two types of bodhicitta, the conventional bodhicitta, which is in accord with the world of appearances and phenomena, as well as the ultimate bodhicitta, as is in accord with true reality. This power is to be brought to bear at this time. Now, when the actual moment of passing away is truly upon us, it is said that the best of positions, physical positions in which to pass away, would be the 7-point posture of Varojana, sitting in an upright position in the meditation posture as we usually sit while practicing. The second best, if that for whatever reason is not possible, would be to lie down in the so-called position of the sleeping lion, which is to lie down on our right side, our bodies straight. We should rest our hands, our head upon our right hand, and with the little finger of the right hand we should block our right nostril so that our breath flows through the left nostril. That would be the second best position to take up when death is upon us. As we then have put ourselves in this resting position of lying down on our right side, having blocked the right nostril with the little finger of our right hand, we then inhale and exhale through our left nostril. And as we practice, as we lie in this way, we then give rise to loving kindness and compassion towards being from the bottom of our hearts, and we proceed to practice the meditation of sending and taking, exchanging ourselves yet again with others in this way. As we rest in this way, we could also alternate our practice of sending and taking with the following thought. As we lie there in such a restful position, we could remind ourselves, we could think that all the appearances and phenomena of samsara, the cycle of suffering, as well as all the appearances of phenomena of having gone beyond suffering, which is nirvana, that everything that we perceive for that matter, that we experience for that matter, are nothing else but the expression of our own minds, simply appear out of our own mind and are nowhere else. We could rest in this thought, this idea, and contemplate this free of any further thought, free of any further contrivance, and simply rest in that. And when we tire of that, we could again take up the practice of Tonglen, of ascending, and taking and alternate these two practices until we then have finally died for good. So Rinpoche wants to call this session to a close now.